Mike Tyson used to say, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, that's okay. And it's okay to get up and move forward. And I would just want everyone to know that it's never too late and it's never too bad. To me, that's my heart. And I just want to encourage people, get up, embrace the thump, because the only way that beauty can be brought forth is through primitive work. It's
Mm.
the only way. And maybe some of your hardest seasons are actually at work to create a way more beautiful future than you ever thought possible.
Oh,
Welcome to Not Till Now, a podcast about courage. I'm your host, Brit Stueven. Season 1 features conversations with performers and collaborators from the debut live show on January 28th, a night where firsts took the stage. In these chats, we'll talk about fear, the creative process, and what happens after you say yes to something you've never done before. Here we go.
hello, everyone. I am so incredibly honored to introduce you to today's guest. David Comstock is the head pastor at Mosaic Church in Littleton. He's a husband, dad, grandpa. Do you like being called a grandpa? Or do you have a name?
Gampa. I'm Gampa.
Gampa. All right, so he's a
Gampa.
Gampa.
That's what my 2-year-old can say.
Oh, I love that. He's a tennis lover and one of the most powerful speakers I've ever seen. And every time I even thought about how to introduce David at Not Till Now, I was brought to tears. One, because of the gratitude I feel for how he has profoundly impacted my life. And two, because I was scared. Scared that if I introduced him as my pastor, wow, has anyone ever started tearing up in an intro? I don't know, but this is the first, Not Till Now. Scared that if I introduced him as my pastor or talked about how he's connected me with God in ways I never knew possible, that people might check out before they even heard him. Because religious baggage is real, people. I certainly have it, and I know I'm not alone. So that night, I kept my intro short, sweet, and safe. But now that some of David's story has been shared and received in the way that it was meant to, I'm very excited to talk about all the things out in the open today. So, David, thank you for joining me for this long-awaited, no-holds-barred conversation.
Love it. Thank you. You are so kind. Too kind. And I wish I could have a little reverse, like Brit intro, and talk about all the ways that you have encouraged me in vulnerability and honesty and the beauty of raw. And so you've been an incredible influence on my life too. And it's funny because before I knew you, I heard about you as you're gonna laugh at this. I don't think I've ever told you this, but there was like conversations about you and being a cussing Christian. And it was like and people were like coming to me and telling me this, and my response was, that's awesome. Like I got to get to know this person, which I think people thought it was gonna have the opposite effect on me, you know. And yeah, we were at a kind of more conservative church before, and there was it was a whole thing. So I don't think I ever told you about that, but
No, that
yeah.
is incredible. We could unpack that in a whole other episode. Cussing Christians, you know?
The cussing Christian, yeah, and it was in your book, and I read the chapter that they were talking to, and I was like, "What do you guys? This is amazing! Like
Oh,
this is awesome and beautiful, and a raw display of what it means to be human, and even in faith." So, yeah, so you've encouraged me a lot.
wow. Well, thank you. It's a lot easier for me to receive things like that in writing than it is just to receive it in real time. I'll always watch back these interviews and I'm like, you did not show gratitude for that really nice thing that person said, but it's so much easier to give it than to receive it.
I know.
But thank you. So before we get into the questions, the juicy questions I have for you, we need to talk about how being in Not Till Now even came to be. So when my David and I came to see you at Mosaic, we all chatted after church, and I think the first thing you said to me was, Brit, I've been seeing your posts on Instagram and you've been doing stand-up and that's so cool. And I often forget that when I post things, people are actually seeing them. And I'm like,
That goes out into the world.
yeah. And I'm like, oh no. Cause I didn't know you very well at that time. And I'm
Yeah,
like,
we didn't.
this
No.
pastor has seen me, talking about farting and pooping and nipple hair and all the things. And he's like congratulating me on it. Like, okay, cool. And as time went on and I'm seeing you do your sermons and seeing you make people laugh, I just couldn't help but think like, oh wait, but I missed the whole part. After you said that, hey Britt, I've seen you on Instagram. You're like, I've always wanted to do stand-up. And so that stuck with me as I watched you. And I'm like, what if a pastor did stand up for the first
My
time
God.
at Not Till Now? And I seriously sat with that idea for probably 2 or 3 months. I remember even telling David, and he's like, you should like get to know him a little bit more first, And I'm like, yeah, you're right. But then it just kept whispering. But I finally asked you, and your response was, thanks for making my heart drop into my stomach. Let me mull it over. What was going through your head?
Man, I was close to going all in on that one, to do the stand-up comedy. I love comedy. I watch a lot of stand-up, and man, some of the best social commentators are comedians. They bring what's really going on in the world to life. And so I was super attracted to it, but terrified. Because I have been in a situation where even this week, on Sunday, I dropped a Chick-fil-A joke and nobody laughed. You know
Yes,
what I
they
mean? And
did.
I was up there and I was like, oh, that didn't land. So thinking about doing that for 7 minutes or 8 minutes it was legitimately like, it's horrifying. So I have a lot of respect for comedians and what they do. And so, yeah, I was intrigued and terrified all at the same time.
Well, first of all, people did laugh. You probably just didn't hear it, or at least in my section, and I laughed. I thought that was funny. David laughed. And second, I think you should explore it sometime because, as you know, I tried it and I took a class and did it a couple times. And yes, I have mad respect for comedians too, but so many myths and things that we tell us about stand-up are
Mm,
definitely debunked in that process, especially when your jokes don't land. So I think you
yeah,
should
like,
definitely try. Like, there's a lot of life lessons to be learned in that process, and it's not
mhm,
just about making people laugh. It's really about connecting with the audience and
yeah.
making them feel less alone in things. But okay, but I'm gonna
I'll tell you what, I'm still mulling it over. I'm
sweet.
still mulling it over. So we'll see. And my stomach is still dropping when
Yeah.
I'm thinking about the possibility of doing that.
Yes, which makes complete sense. So our next plan was for you to tell a story from the soul in a non-religious setting and not even mention God. So tell us why you didn't want to mention the divine at first.
Yeah. Uh, you said it already that, man, ton of people have some misconceptions about faith and Christianity in particular. And so I'm always really intrigued. One is I don't believe that the absence of God's name or Christian lingo means the absence of God. And I think there's some beautiful ways to be able to talk about things that, what I believe all of our souls are longing for, that point us to God, that you don't have to use religious language to have those conversations. And so, yeah, man, for me, I just really wanted to create space for, like you said, for people not to reject me before the conversation even started, and let people know that, man, I've seen people use God in some really horrible ways, to manipulate and to control and to hurt and, all of those types of things. And so I just want to be sensitive to that. And I'm always thinking of ways to, it's like a good movie, like you see a movie and you see a scene that happens and something beautiful, and then something wakes up inside of you and you're responding both to what's happening on the screen and what's happening in your soul. And I believe God's like that. Like he can speak to us and reach us and meet us in a lot of different ways. And it doesn't necessarily have to be overtly Christian.
That's so true. I mean, Mr. Rogers, right? He never mentioned
Never
Christ
mentioned God. Yeah.
And he was definitely a believer. I think it was just knowing your life's work. It's interesting, right, that a pastor would not talk about God. And when I was telling people that, they were like, man, I've got mad respect for him that he's not selling it to me, like that. That's what
totally.
people were thinking. Yeah. So,
yeah.
But then a few weeks before the event, I read what you were planning to say, and you had God woven in after all. And it was gentle, but it was powerful. And I want to know what shifted for you.
Yeah, it's really hard for me to tell my story of recovery and renewal and healing without attributing it to something outside of myself. Like a lot of my healing and recovery and newness of life that I experienced I can only describe it as divine. Something outside of me did it because I didn't have what it took inside of me to get there. And I know that sounds weird because it sounds like I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth, just in my story in general, because I do believe humans are amazingly capable and have more potential than we give ourselves credit for. And it's like why we love watching the Olympics and professional sports and all these things, because we see the potential of humanity that's there. But on the other side of us, we're also frail and weak and need help. And that was my story, was the moment where I needed something outside of me to lift me up. And I didn't know another way to communicate that without either making something up, or just plainly telling the truth of what my experience was in that.
Yes. I mean, that's a big reason why I have not published a second book that I've been working on, because there's so much in there that I cannot communicate without mentioning God. And I've been wrestling with just how to do that. But anyway, I'm just so ultimately happy that you wove that in and that you told your story, because it is your story too. And that's what's so cool. You weren't telling anyone what to do. You were telling your life experience. And I'm going to put the link to your talk in the show notes for people to hear it if they weren't in the room. But can you give us a quick summary of thump, one of the main parts of your talk? What does that mean, and what does it mean to you?
In the talk, the definition of thump is the universal sound of hard work. And, it's a coffee shop here in Denver, and I had that encounter with the barista. That was amazing. Just his interaction with me that day taught me so much about what it means to be a good human. But it's more than just the universal sound of hard work. It's the universal sound of primitive work. And I think oftentimes we try to avoid the thump. We try to avoid the hard work or the primitive work or the dirty work, the ugly work, the not feel so good work that happens deep in our soul. And really it comes to the point of really knowing ourselves and being known by others, and being honest about why we are the way we are and why we are held back in the ways that we're held back. And so yeah, thump is this idea of embracing primitive work, because only out of primitive work can beauty happen. And it happens in art, like when you're painting a picture, you get messy and it's primitive. You got to pour paint out of paint tubes, or you got to cut a piece of wood to carve something, or you got to break out a chisel and a hammer to sculpt a sculpture, or get your hands dirty with clay. And so there's primitive work that needs to happen before beauty can emerge. And so it really resonates with me. And there was always a passage in scripture that Jesus talked about. He says a kernel of wheat has to fall to the ground and die before it can germinate and grow into a stalk of wheat that can feed, and create life. And so there is this sense where a type of death has to happen in our lives in order for us to experience life. And so thump represents that to me. And I think we all need to learn how to discover the beauty of primitive work.
Yes, it's so good, and there's so much to this. And so you related that story that the barista told you about the meaning of thump for them, and you tied it into your story of your body hitting the floor after a near overdose. And in that moment, instead of feeling shame, you experienced something else entirely. From what I gathered, faith to you as you were growing up was not really gentle and loving. And I know I experienced that too. So take us back to that very vulnerable moment if you can, because it's very pivotal.
Yeah, for sure. I got addicted to meth in college, and I had a 7-year meth addiction. Portion of that, I legitimately was living out of my car, homeless on the streets of San Francisco. Doing all kinds of destructive things just to survive. And even part of it, I became someone that I never thought possible. Like I was a little cheery Southern California like beach kid, and man, I had eyes that were filled with life growing up. And I became the guy that most people see like asking for money on the street corners. That's not all there, subhuman, less than human. It's not true. But my humanity was hidden really, really deep in my addiction. Man, I did things that I never thought possible that I would do. I had experiences that I never thought possible. I became, a liar and a thief. It was really that bad. For me, it wasn't even just the moment. It was that season of time that life got worse than I ever thought possible. I became a person that I never thought I could possibly become, which is a lot of hubris and pride and arrogance. Again, the human condition is frail, and we are all one step in decision away from one another. And so it's just crazy. So when I hit the ground in that thump, when I passed out from a near drug overdose, my life was literally crumbling. In that time, I learned how to manage my sickness in some really weird ways. I would stay clean for a little while and then binge really hard, and stay clean for a little while and binge really hard. And in that season, I met my wife, and we had been married for a little over a year. And she was starting to uncover how unhealthy and sick I really was. And that was starting to come, and she was getting ready to leave me. And again, my life was crumbling. And coming home from that binge, when I hit the floor, it was literally like I went to hell. I don't know how else to describe it. And it was my own hell. It wasn't some place that I went to. It was the own hell that I created in my life, based on the things that I did and the ways that I hurt people and the ways that I hurt myself and all those types of things. And I was in the darkest, most depraved state that I never even thought possible. And so it was about as far away from reality as I could possibly get. And the strange thing, I was completely aware of how dark and broken I was, but it was in that moment that the light of God shined through. And you already said it, alluded to it. Like, it wasn't condemning. There was no "I told you so." There was no "wag your feet, you should have listened to me." There was nothing like that at all. It was simply like, I'm just here. I'm here. And the fact that God would come and show up in the hell that I created to love me and rescue me was absolutely mind-blowing to me. I never had an earthly relationship like that. I'd never had a spiritual relationship like that. It was so foreign and so confronting to everything I thought I knew or believed about who God was and the ideas of what heaven and hell is. All these concepts that I had in my mind were just shattered in a moment.
Oh,
And that's what allowed me to get off of the floor and try to take another step. It was like, oh, if that's who God is, and if that's what God is like, and if that's what this is all about, then maybe I can experience life after death.
I'm so I'm so engrossed in this. I can just see it and I can feel it. And I often think, where would I be in my life if David did not find God in the way that he did? Like where would so many people be without you and your heart and what you, in your last sermon, there was that quote about how in order for you to love something, you have to see someone else love it first or something along those lines. And I was like watching you be so strong in your faith is what really strengthens mine. And I'm totally going off the plan here, but I just had to tell you that.
Thank you.
um,
That's super sweet. And I think vice versa. I mean, I think we saw, 11 people love something, love vulnerability, the Not Till Now show,
mhm.
and really embrace it in a way that helps to give other people courage to step out, and it happens in all other things, whether it's a cancer diagnosis or a failed marriage or relationship that you did something you didn't think that was going to work out, or ADHD, like
Yeah.
it's like when you watch someone embrace a life beyond whatever their diagnosis is and experience life, and that gives everybody courage. That's what attracted me so much to Not Till Now is it is that quote. Sometimes you have to see someone love something before you can love it yourself.
It's so true. Watching courage in real time, just it does something to the soul for sure. So that actually does bring me to the next question in a beautiful way. You said, in my hiding, I was found. And so I want to know from you, what do you think it is about our lowest moments that can open us in a way that nothing else can?
Hmm. That's such a good question. I say that everyone's greatest desire is to be known and loved. I just think that's a human condition. I believe that with my whole heart. I've never run into anyone who I've counseled or talked to that at the heart of whatever's going on in their life, they just want to be known, seen, and loved for who they really are. The problem is that our greatest desire now becomes our greatest fear. If we're really known, then we won't be loved. And so everything we're longing for is hidden behind masks and pretending. And then what happens when we pretend and perform for others, or we put on a mask, we never really know whether the person loves us or the person we're pretending to be. It's almost like our lowest point forces us to be seen. It forces us to like there's no denying that this is who I am. I can't pretend anymore because the real me has broken through the facade. And it's in those moments where you're out there and you realize, you know what? People still love me. I'm still lovable. People are still standing by. You know what I mean? So I think there's something beautiful about the freedom that comes with I don't have to pretend anymore, because pretending is such a exhausting thing, and we do it in all kinds of weird ways, as humans. We put on veneers, and it's exhausting to maintain the image that we're trying to portray out in the world, and once that's finally gone, it's like a weight lifted off of you. And I've had a lot of different people in prison or jail, and one of the things a lot of people say is, in here I don't have to pretend. Everybody knows I'm broken in here. Everybody knows I'm here for some reason, so at least I don't have to pretend anymore.
I resonate with that yet again, because for those listening, David and I are in a small group together through church, and there's 5 couples. And we're going through this thing where we're all sharing our life stories and sharing our testimonies. And I wrote in my writing group about how I shared my story and testimony, and how I couldn't believe that after I shared everything that I was still loved. Like that, as I was writing, I didn't realize that that was one of my biggest fears until I was just in the zone and in the flow. And then I'm like, oh my gosh, that's been an ultimate core of so many of my fears of sharing myself is that fear of being judged and being rejected and no longer loved and accepted, and to feel actually welcomed and to feel that I wasn't alone that night. That has been a big turning point in what I'm even able to share just this week alone. I mean, there's so many things. So like the rock bottom is such in the moment it sucks, but it is so life-giving to reach that point and have nothing else left.
Yeah. And we experience in all kinds of ways. I remember one time I broke my dad's watch stand on his nightstand, and he had this little nice watch and this watch stand that went with it, and I knocked it off and broke it, and I tried to glue it and piece it back together and do this, and I remember him coming home and walking into like the facade, and the guilt was just weighing on me and weighing on me. And I remember just blurting out and being like, he's like, "Hey, how's your day?" And I'm like, "I broke your watch today," and then I remember I didn't care about the consequences. I just didn't want to hold on to that lie anymore, and there was just freedom that came from that. And I think it's true. And look, there are wrong places to share yourself because they're not safe, and people aren't interested in knowing. But if you have a group of people who really want to know you, what happens is honesty about who we really are has the opposite effect of what we think it's going to have. We think it's going to separate people from us, and it really just draws us near to one another. And it's, we're like a band of brothers in that group, right? Because we've all been through a bunch of stuff in life, and yet we survived and we made it, and we're here, and we can still be known and loved and experience sense of joy and fruitfulness in our lives. And so, yeah, it has the opposite effect of what we think.
Like I'm picturing, that experiment where if pepper is on top of water and you put your finger on it, it just disperses. Yeah. That's how I feel sometimes before I share things on social media, that it's just going to, everyone's going to be scared. They're going to run for the hills and be like, what was that?
Yeah.
And maybe some people, they do that. They probably block me. They can't handle it. And that's fine. That has happened.
Yeah.
And that is okay. We're not for everyone. But I can attest to that just recently, sharing something very, very, very deeply personal. And I've been so overwhelmed by the amount of people that are showing up and telling me their own things. And so I just want to reiterate that is so true.
Yeah.
So after the thump, you were very honest with all of us, and you're like, not everything changed overnight. But that was a turning point for you. And from my perspective, that was the start of your journey to becoming a pastor, perhaps. I've heard pieces of it, but I don't think I know the full outline. So can you tell us and just how that all went? Where in all the cities that you've lived to in your life?
Yeah. We've been everywhere. Yeah. So my big thump moment happened in Scottsdale, Arizona. That's where I was living at the time. And I'd moved from northern Nevada, the Reno area, to Scottsdale. And I was legitimately running from my drug addiction. And that's where I met my wife and everything. And after that moment, it was a slow process. And it's funny because this is how long ago this was. We looked up a church in a phone book, which people are like, "What's a phone book?"
Right.
And literally we're just like, "Oh, this is close to us." And so we went to that church, and I was so nervous because, man, I was a mess, and I didn't I didn't know how people were going to receive Tara and I, like we come into this place and, all my imagination about religion and church and past experiences and all that. I get into the church and they're totally loving. They didn't look like me, but they loved me. And slowly we started building relationships, and I'm a musician. And so I would play on their worship team. It was so funny. They'd had 2 services, and in between services, I'd go out back and take smoke breaks. And so I was like, I still had like a 2-pack of cigarette a day, like smoking habit. And I'd literally and I thought it was normal. You know what I mean? I didn't know that you don't do that in church environment. And nobody said anything to me. Nobody was like, oh, you shouldn't do. They were just like, we love you. Like, you're good. Just be you. And eventually I came to my own conclusion, probably has more to do with media and becoming more aware that smoking's not great for you. And so I stopped smoking. We actually adopted our daughter, and I was like, oh, I need to stop that. And so that was the big thing. But it was just a long, slow journey of picking up the pieces of my life. And what happened was the realization that there really is always a second chance. There really is. And it doesn't matter if you're on your 100th chance, there's always a second chance, in life. And so I just put one foot in front of the other, and things that were important to me started to come into view. And I really believe that like God helped to give revelation of what's really important. People are important, freedom and dignity and worth and value and grace and love. All these are the things that are important that I wanted to start pursuing. And I didn't know how to get to those things without God. Because I tried in my life, I've tried to find meaning and purpose and value and worth and dignity and all those types of things. And they're just not in places that are without God. You can climb the corporate ladder, you can be famous, you can have tons of money, you can do all those things, and it's still missing substance. And so I just started pursuing the things of God, and we served at a church. And yeah, one day the pastor came to me and said that he thinks I'm called to be a pastor. And I was like, no way. Like, you have no idea who I am. Like, there's no way that I'm going to be a pastor. And that started just like gnawing on my soul. And for months I wrestled with it. And then finally Tara and I came back together and we're like, I think God wants to do this. And in that time, it'd been a while, been a couple of years, a lot had changed. We adopted our daughter. I started working in the height of the mortgage industry. So I was making like well into 6 figures, making really good money. And, I had this pastor come to me and he's like, I think you should call in the ministry. And he like offered me a salary. It was like $42,000 or something like that. And everyone's like, you're crazy. Like, there's no way I'm doing that. And I just couldn't get away from it. And so I finally I went to that pastor and I was like, you know what? I think this is what I want to do. I want to help people. I want to serve the Lord in this way. And so he hired me on. I quit my job. My family thought I was nuts. I had come so far from where I'd fallen. And they were just like, you're throwing it all away. You have worked really hard to build your life back up and you're throwing it all away for this job that pays nothing. And so I did that. And I kid you not, this was in 2008, the mortgage industry collapsed. And so everything that I would have been in would have been devastated anyways. And it would have been worse because I would have had nothing. And so it was just funny how it worked out. Like, I was on this journey of trying to find my calling, and I made the difficult decision to legitimately live in poverty and serve the Lord, or be wealthy, have money, and go into this industry that I didn't know was getting ready to collapse. So that's how I got into ministry.
I had no idea.
Yeah.
And I just can't help but wonder if that pastor had not suggested, had not asked, would that have happened? I mean, I'm sure God, knowing you today, I'm confident God would have thrown some other signs,
Yeah.
burning fireball signs. But what did he say? And did he tell you why he thought you should be a pastor?
I think he just saw something in me, which was really beautiful because, I grew up in a broken home, didn't have a really strong relationship with my dad. And I didn't have a lot. We were always surviving, in our family. And so I didn't have a lot of people in my life calling things out of me. And this was the first time father figure, an older man, came into my life and started calling things out of me, which taught me a lot about the power of being able to call things out of one another, and it's like, I want to be that for the rest of my life. I want to be we have so much division and hatred in the world where people are trying to step over people and put people down. Like, I just want to spend my life helping to elevate others and call the good, like, out of others. And um yeah, I just firmly believe that the true message that God has given to us in Jesus Christ does that. It actually adds dignity and value in people. It doesn't strip it down or take it away.
Amen. um,
I don't mean to
okay.
preach. I'm sorry.
No, no.
I really believe that with my whole heart. And it breaks my heart when I see churches and people of faith misrepresent that message.
Mm-hmm. For sure. Going back, I'm just so fascinated by the genesis of this and how, no pun intended,
I see what you did there.
and how, so yeah, you're doing worship and praying and doing your thing up there. And
like, as far as like preaching and speaking publicly in front of people, that was not a normal, natural gift for me. I get terrified in front of audiences, and speaking is not, it's not natural to me. So I've had to work really hard to overcome fear and learn how to communicate in a way that's clear and coherent.
so take us on that journey. So how have you worked hard on that, and what have been your steps to getting to where you are today? You did tell us in your talk that you dropped out of college. So how did you pick those pieces back up?
I ended up going back and finishing my undergrad at a Christian university, and then went on to seminary. So I have 2 master's degrees in theology, and so that's where a lot of my training happened. But it didn't happen right away, and so, like, I planted my first church before I even went to seminary. So before I was even trained as a pastor, like, officially, I was already in church planting. That's a whole other topic. But I was planting with a guy. I was a worship leader, and he wanted me to speak. So this is a different guy, and he's like, "Hey, I think you should give the message." And I was like, "No way! Like, there's no way. I'll play my guitar, I'll sing, do whatever you want me to do, but there's no way that I'm going to stand up somewhere for 30 minutes and tell people what they should or can think about God. Like, there's no way." And so he convinced me to do it. And literally the night before, I legitimately had a nervous breakdown. I I hid under the table. I was so nervous about speaking. I hid under the table. Tara, my wife, didn't know what to do. She calls my friend Robbie and tells him what's going on. He's like, "David's freaking out. He's on the table." He didn't live too far away. So he comes to my house. Literally, he crawls under the table, lays down with me, and just starts speaking life over me. He's like, "David, this isn't about you. This is about God. Look what God's done. Like, you don't have to be any, you don't have to prove yourself." And so that was my first sermon the next day I gave, and it was awful. I stammered. It wasn't good. It was like, it was awful. But that started my journey of, like, okay, it wasn't that bad. I didn't die. You know what I mean? No one stormed out of the church and left. Everybody was gracious and nice. And so from that time on, I really wanted to figure out, what does it look like to do that well? And so I started reading books and learning and taking classes, and went to seminary and all of that to try to, yeah.
Man, I am strangely comforted by the fact that your first sermon was terrible. Because so let me explain.
Well, it wasn't just my first sermon. It was probably my first 100 sermons. So yeah, it was not like, oh, I figured it out. And then so it was a long process. And to get comfortable or good at anything. It just takes practice. You just need to do it. And it's the same thing here. Again, I want to help younger people and next generations hone in their calling and gift. And
Yes.
so I have a group of people that I walk with right now who are interested in preaching and teaching. Once a month we meet and I do training, and then they're going to get opportunity to be able to speak and, try their things for the first time.
I love that so much. And you totally nailed it with why it comforts me that you weren't good when you started, because in order to become really good at something, you just have to do it and practice. And even along the way, like there was a moment, David and I are watching the Masters this weekend, and somebody just flubbed it, and we're both just like,
Yeah, I love
yes,
those.
like we love when that happens because
Yeah,
they're human, not because we're
same.
wanting them to fail, but because we really look up to these people, and then we're like, oh, thank goodness they
Oh,
don't have it all
yeah,
together all the
it's
time,
okay.
and
Yeah,
so just to see how far you have come. And every sermon that I see you give, I'm like, man, that was the best one. No, that was the best one. And so to know where you've come from, it's really, really cool. And it's really inspiring to me.
yeah. The key to any of that, and it's something you do really well, is just bringing yourself to the table. And it doesn't matter if it's comedy, it doesn't matter if it's writing, it doesn't matter if it's like talking or inspirational, whatever it is. Like, the things that resonate to us the most are the ones where the person delivering the message is most present and in it. They're not trying to perform, they're just bringing themselves to the table. And that is, man, I think that's where the magic is.
Yeah, I I agree with that for sure. I really resonated with this past Sunday when you were talking about Moses and how God called him to do big things, but he didn't have it all together. And you're saying he had to go to anger management classes and had murdered someone and wasn't who I ever thought Moses was, right? In my mind, I didn't know anything about Moses, but until really now, not till now. And my assumption my assumption of him was that he was perfect and because he wrote Genesis, right?
Yeah, he wrote the first 5 books of the Bible.
Yeah, so like that alone, I'm like, okay, Moses is pretty cool that he's got it together. But then to know that, and I resonate with that because I often ask myself, who do I think I am to do the things I do and to lead these events, but I feel like because I'm not super professional and I'm not some like crazy great speaker, right? Like a really button up speaker who has her stuff memorized, because I never have it memorized. I cannot to this day memorize anything. So I will read from my notes probably until the end of
Same.
time. And part of me thinks maybe that empowers other people and makes it less intimidating. And they're like, okay, well, if the person who's hosting the show is reading from a podium, and not giving a TED Talk type thing. Oh, okay. Well, maybe I can do it
Maybe
too,
I can do that. Yeah,
because
totally.
yes. And as long as you're in it, that is what matters. It's the heart of it. It's not the perfection.
Yeah,
Yeah. So
totally.
I'm just all fired up
Presence over perfection any
for
day.
sure.
I'll take it any day. Like, it's funny about Moses. He was sent to the king of Egypt. They call it his Pharaoh, to basically ask Pharaoh to release all the Israelites, all of God's people, like, out. And so God goes to Moses, and Moses says no because he has a speech impediment. So
Yeah.
it's legitimately in the Bible. Like, he's like, I can't do it. And God's like, yes, you can. Like, go. And then God gets frustrated because Moses just won't do it. So he actually sends his brother Aaron with him. Who's like, all right, you go. Aaron will speak for you. But he had to learn how to use his voice, even with a limitation. And over time, I mean, Moses became, like you said, the one who wrote the first 5 books of the Bible, but in the beginning didn't want to because he had a speech impediment and a limitation. And I think that's such a beautiful message for all of us, is like, God's not concerned with perfection. He knows exactly who we are and our limitations. and he's bestowed gifts on all of us to share with the world and wants that to happen, you know?
Oh, yeah. It's just insane that God has placed all these people in the Bible. All these stories are they're all broken people, and
All broken people.
but he sees what everyone can bring and who everyone is, and it's just it's so amazing.
It is pretty cool.
Man, so I told you your story after Not Till Now really landed with a lot of people. The photographer that night told me that she burst into tears. You saw one of the performers at rehearsal. You know, she was moved by your practice talk. There were numerous people who were like, you know, I think I want to go to church now, you know, that I've seen David talk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One person I walked in and they said, I would go to church if it was like that. I was like, yes.
Yes. So, what did that feel like for you personally? I'm so curious.
You know, I love people, and I love helping people to expand their imagination about God and the world that he made. And I guess I'm not really looking for any moment or thing to happen. I just trust that God's at work in people's lives, and he works in all kinds of different ways and brings them on a journey. And I'm just really happy that I could maybe play a small part in helping to introduce a new idea to someone and help them to be, maybe instead of hurt or closed off by an idea, to maybe start to be curious about it. And for me, that's like a real win, you know. And maybe not every person that claims faith in God or Jesus is an a-hole, you know, like maybe, maybe if I could just get that idea of curiosity and openness to it, who knows what that could lead to in people's lives. And I really do believe that the thing that drives us is God's secret weapon. It's this little constant like sense of there's more, or like emptiness. It's running in the background of our lives. It's like hardwired in the operating system of the soul. And when people actually believe that that thing is driving them towards God, the one who made them, right? The programmer of it all, like I think that's where real meaning and fulfillment comes from. And so if I can play any role in helping people be a little bit more open to that, I'm stoked.
So that brings me to a question about, you've probably seen so many things in your journey, right? You've seen a lot of heartbreak. You've seen a lot of things happen in a lot of people's lives. But I'm wondering, are there people who were doubtful and then came to Christ and something transformed in their life? Like, is there anything that just stands out? I'm sure there's a lot.
Yeah, there is a lot. Yeah. I mean, I've had so many encounters with people that were opposed to God and who have now met him, have a relationship with God. And so I mean, people's stories are people's stories, you know. Right now I meet with a PhD engineer guy. He's on my tennis team, and he is a committed atheist. And we played tennis. He knew I was a pastor, very standoffish, from me. And now we meet once a month and have a beer and talk about faith and philosophy and ideas. And so the beauty in that thing is what he thought was a threat to his beliefs is now a friend, you know. And what he's starting to learn is that him and I are not so different in the way that we're trying to make sense of the world. And we have a friendship, and it's okay for us to still hold different beliefs, but our lives can intersect in some really beautiful ways. And we geek out on, I'm a philosophy nut. I love that stuff. And so we have both read really big books that no one else would ever read. So we light up because we get to talk about it together. And so I've had tons of people whose lives have been transformed through and been able to walk alongside them in transformation. But even more important is fighting for friendship and unity, even in the midst of diversity, like diversity of beliefs and in all kinds of ways. Like we all have different, moral standards and ethics that run and guard our lives, but that doesn't mean that we can't love and serve and connect and be friends with one another, And so that's kind of a little bit more what makes me come alive, you know. As a counselor, like I do pastoral counseling all the time. I love walking alongside people and helping them go from different moments and levels and help them do the hard, primitive work of becoming free from the things that hold them back. And so I love that work, but I also love when people don't necessarily agree with my conclusions, but still are willing to enter into relationship with me and be my friend.
I love that. And the world definitely needs that, right? Especially right now.
Man, we need that. Yeah, we need that so much.
For anyone who may be listening to this and they're feeling stuck, or they are in hiding, or they've maybe hit their version of a thump, curious, what would you want them to know?
Embrace it. Lean in. Honestly, I want them to know that that's not the end. It's the beginning. Mike Tyson used to say, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, that's okay. It's okay to get punched in the face. Like there's fight after the fall, and it's okay to get up and move forward. And I would just want everyone to know that it's never too late and it's never too bad. To me, that's my heart. And I want to encourage people, get up, embrace the thump, because the only way that beauty can be brought forth is through primitive work. It's the only way. Like that's the only way beauty can happen. And maybe some of your hardest seasons are actually at work to create a way more beautiful future than you ever thought possible.
And that there's always second chances, right?
Always. I get them all the time.
Yeah. Every freaking morning, right? We get a new
Every morning I get a
day.
second chance.
Oh, I love mornings so much.
Yeah, same.
And then, so real quick, I bet people are wondering what your hat is all about. So there's another podcast they could listen to, right? Tell us about that real quick.
Yes, you can go to welcometomosaic.com and find the Centered podcast on there. It's a podcast where we talk about faith and the everyday stuff of life. And how do we meet God and explore God in some mundane, unexpected places? So
it's really good. I really enjoy it. And that's also where you discuss things that you don't get to in certain sermons. Because you'd be up there for like days. You'd be
too long.
Yeah.
Yeah, they do put a time limit on me. So I actually have a countdown clock that I am fighting against every Sunday, and sometimes I'm obedient to it.
Yeah, I'm glad that you weren't on Sunday. I'm glad that you kept going, because that was great. That was a good one. I'm going to link to that too, that most recent sermon that I keep going back to. But well, thank you so much for this. I really, really appreciate you taking the time. I know you're a very busy man, but this was such a great conversation, and it's an honor to know you and to keep learning more and more about you. And you're just such a gift to all of us. So thank you so much for joining me
Brit.
today.
It is a pleasure to be here, and I love what you're doing. And I can't wait to see more.
Well, thanks. All right. Have a great day. Thanks for listening to today's episode of Not Till Now. I hope this conversation stirred something in you. Don't forget to check the show notes for a recap and ways to stay connected. And if you know someone in your life who needs permission, send this to them. See you next time.